Thank you. My name is Maury Litwack, and I'm the Director of State Political Affairs for the Orthodox Union and the OU Advocacy Center. This is the second of our forums for the Nassau County Executive race. We appreciate the executive being with us today, and I just wanted to introduce, welcome you to the Orthodox Union before we open it up for Jeff to make an introduction here. Just I want to say that it's very fitting that we're in this room, as I mentioned last week as well at the forum that we did, Mr. Swazi, that this is a room in the OU headquarters which has all of our banners from all of our different organizations here, and especially in the 5 towns where you have very active NCSY and Yachad and our synagogue services departments, each of which are represented here by different department heads, including Rabbi Judah Isaacs here. I just wanted to say that I just wanted to say that the OU is the world's largest Orthodox umbrella organization, specifically because we were there for the community when the community needs us most. When it came to Sandy relief, we were there for the community, which we'll talk about a little bit at this forum. And when it comes to forums like this and formats like this, in order to interact with candidates who we need to interact with in order to move our policies forward. So I just want to thank everyone for coming here. And before we give it over to Jeff, I want to recognize our Executive Director of the OU Advocacy Center, Nathan Diamond, just briefly, without telling him I'm going to recognize him, just briefly to speak a little bit about the FEMA work that we did, that we really do need this race is critical for, and we had Mr. Swazi talk about it last week, and we need to talk about this week as well.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. So as Maury referenced, we try at the OU Advocacy Center, like the OU as a whole, to be both proactive for the community's needs, but also responsive when the community is challenged. And there was certainly a very significant response, significant challenge almost exactly a year ago when Hurricane Sandy hit the Northeast. And as many in the room are aware, alongside the homes and the businesses and other parts of the community of Long Island that were damaged, synagogues and churches and other houses of worship were damaged as well. In New York and New Jersey, approximately 250 houses of worship were damaged. And FEMA, in their wisdom, such as exists in federal bureaucracies, decided that every kind of nonprofit organization that was damaged by the storm could get federal aid to rebuild their facilities, except for houses of worship. And so we were as responsive as we could be. We worked together with the UGA Federation of New York, with the Catholic Bishops Conference and others to build a coalition, and then reached out to key members of Congress and were successful in passing legislation through the House of Representatives to reverse this discriminatory policy of FEMA's. Unfortunately, we're still being held up in the Senate by candidly one individual senator who disagrees with us, but doesn't want to let the bill even come to the floor for a vote. We're continuing to press ahead to try to right this wrong, not only for the communities impacted by Sandy, but also for future communities because of future disasters that may, God forbid, occur. But while we're held up in the United States Senate, we know that there are folks here at the local level who, unlike many in Washington, have to deliver real services and real results for their constituents on a day-in, day-out basis. And certainly somebody who is in the position of county executive is someone who can do that in response to smaller issues, like when my sister and her community in West Hempstead were in need of a playground that was safe and suitable for their children. There was one recently built in the Halls Pond Park, and the community appreciates that very much. But also more severe and more significant and challenging issues like the response to Sandy. We look forward to continuing to work with the Nassau County Executive on such an important issue for our community as well.
So I'm going to let Jeff make an introduction. I just want to recognize Rabbi Kamenetsky here. We appreciate coming into the city for this. I also want to recognize the fact that we are also in the OU headquarters. We have 2 of our executives here, Mayor Fertig, who is the Chief Communication Officer, and who is a very able-bodied brother, as who you may know, and also Paul Glasser, who is our Chief Development Officer.
This
is one of the council of elders of the Jewish community, so we also recognize him coming. And with that, I'll give Jeff over to Jeff for the introduction.
Thank you very much, Maury. Thank you all for coming here today to join us for this leadership lunch meeting with County Executive Ed Mangano. As Maury said, this is a part of a series of leadership meetings with elected officials and candidates for office. Let me just say that the OU Advocacy Center is the public policy, nonpartisan arm of the Orthodox Union, and we're a nonprofit 501c3, and thus we do not endorse, support, or oppose any candidate for election for any office. County Executive Mangano was elected to his current position in 2009. He grew up in Long Island and completed a law degree at Hofstra Law School. Prior to being elected, Mr. Mangano ran a very large and successful newspaper and printing and publishing operation, which I guess has something in common with Mr. Furtick here. And he also served as counsel to the Long Island firm of Rifkin Radler. And Mr. Mangano was also a county legislator for 7 consecutive terms until being elected to the position of county executive. And personally speaking, I serve on the Peninsula Public Library Board, which is one of the small, many hundreds of different governmental boards in Nassau County. And Mr. Mangano has been very, very good to the Peninsula Public Library and to libraries across the county to make sure that our youth have the ability to receive the education after school curriculum that they require. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to County Executive Ed Mangano. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for allowing me to join with you today. You want an opening statement?
Whatever you like.
Okay. Well, let me tell you a little bit about why I ran for county executive. In 2009, after 8 years of my opponent, I just had the time to reflect on the fiscal and economic policies. And if you look at them, after significant tax increases, 23% real property tax increase, increased debt by $402 million, had just instituted a home energy tax, a very regressive tax on anything and everything you use to cool or heat your home, and planned another 16.5% real property tax increase. I had a chance to look at what was occurring in Nassau County, and I just didn't like it. Those fiscal and economic policies led to the following. These are just facts and not rhetoric. We had in 2009, and the speech actually, the State of County speech delivered by my opponent was things are about as bad as they can get. And that's after all that money. We looked at the statistics. Nassau County had the highest unemployment rate in the region and the lowest sales tax revenue in a 20-year period. Jobs were fleeing, our economy was falling down, housing values were shrinking, and I just didn't like the policies that were put in place. I don't believe produced the results that our citizens would expect, which would be job opportunities and a strong economy. So in 4 short years, I took office. I repealed the home energy tax. First administration put money back in people's pockets. 4 consecutive budgets, no property tax increase. And most importantly, we went to work on job creation, strong job creation programming. I had a 2-pronged approach. I made a one-stop shop for small businesses so they can stay in business and grow. And they represent 60% of the employment in Nassau County. And I'm happy to say we were able to help just in this last year 150 small businesses. More importantly, I put together an economic development team that went out beyond our borders to try to attract companies back to Nassau County, to make that investment in Nassau County, to bring jobs back to Nassau County. And we're very successful. We have companies like Hain Celestial, Jessica Lighting, Our Best Produce. We just opened up yesterday. They moved from the Bronx to Nassau County, their corporate headquarters, their warehousing, and these are positive signs for us. So now when we look at those same statistics, Nassau County has the lowest unemployment rate in the whole region and the largest growth in sales tax revenue in the whole region, 9% growth. Last quarter over quarter, 17% growth. Our economy is moving, jobs are coming back, more opportunities, and I say that I believe the fiscal policies that I put forward are having the right results for our economic policies. They're helping people. We also looked at solving housing option issues, especially for our young people. Many people talk about the vision of transit-oriented development. We found a way to create a program and actually make it a reality. We put forth an economic incentive program to convert empty, vacant office buildings that are near transit hubs and convert them into apartments. I have 4 under construction right now. They create over 850 housing options for our workforce. In addition, worked with HUD to bring back dollars to help any community that wishes to study and identify and then utilize our incentive policy. And 3 villages applied and were awarded the funds to do just that: Limbrook, Baldwin, and Valley Stream. So we're building housing options for our young. We are building job opportunities, which is the best way to keep our college graduates on Long Island and in Nassau County. We haven't asked our taxpayers for not one single dime more. I put forth a 4-year plan to address the inherited $385 million deficit. We didn't ask our taxpayers to foot that bill. I came up with a plan to solve that. So each year we're cutting down the deficit, we're moving in the right direction in our economy, and I'm asking for 4 more years so I can continue those policies. That's my opening statement. I could keep going, but I figured I'd take questions. You got your format?
Yeah, before we take that question, I guess we'll just mention what Mr. Diamond was talking about, which was the FEMA aid to synagogues and to houses of worship, religious institutions. Do you support that? I mean, that's a big deal.
Well, I certainly support the bill that you have in Congress. I think it makes 0 sense, if not explicit in the law, it certainly should have been implicit in the law, to restore houses of worship that were damaged by the superstorm. I mean, that is really the inherent spirit of the law, to bring those dollars back, to restore communities to what they were. In our case, we have the unique opportunity to strengthen all of these structures. So I strongly support you, not only on the federal level, but I've been working with the state. You know, obviously Hurricane Sandy, I have an intimate knowledge from being there, from leading emergency management through it, to putting together county, state, and federal teams on every single issue so we can, make certain that we maximize the efficiency of the dollars that are starting to trickle down from the money we lobbied Congress for. So specifically, for example, sometimes there's creative ways to overcome these problems, and I would draw your attention, I'm sure you're probably familiar with the Federal Register of March 2013, which specifically addresses the superstorm with respect to houses of worship, which appears to articulate exceptions that are covered on the onset, even without your legislation. So if part of your religious houses of worship were used for food pantries or for adult literacy or other programs other than specific exclusive worship, you are covered under the present funding, and you should follow that up. We work with the state. For example, we found a creative way to overcome what was known as the Earth Movement exclusion. If you could really understand this, that the federal government was applying a rule called Earth Movement that said if damaged structures were damaged because of the foundation moving, because the earth moved, they weren't covered under the FEMA dollars, which was insane because clearly Superstorm Sandy or Hurricane Sandy, its primary damage was caused by storm surge, tidal surge, 9.5 year surge, which obviously moved the earth and created a lot of this damage. So we were able to work with the state to utilize another pot of money, and the Earth Movement exception, although the legislation not changed at the congressional level, at the FEMA level, we were able to have those structures covered under some CBGB dollars, and they are now being covered locally, even though being denied on the FEMA level on the specific Earth Movement exclusion. That's obviously legislation needs to change, just as clearing up the Sanford Act needs to change, and we would hope that they do it quickly. Certainly have my support, certainly have my letters of support for our local representatives to support your bill and whoever else that you need, in addition to working with the state to look for other creative ways to utilize the dollars that are in place to restore every house of worship, not just to where the status it was, but obviously they should have the advantage of mitigating, making it stronger, whether it be raising the utilities or raising the entire structure, whatever is suitable and realistic, depending upon the location, geographic location of your structure. But this is the opportunity to do that. Houses of worship should not be excluded. It makes no sense, and my argument would be that they are covered under the spirit of that law, if not expressed in the statute itself.
Thank you. Take questions?
On the topic of flood,
Yes.
So when Nassau County when FEMA set their new maps 2 years ago, a lot of houses were moved out from what was not required for flood insurance to required. The federal legislation was able to grandfather for several years a reduced rate for people who were moved out of or into required flood. And we see statements out of Washington indicating that that's not going to be extended. And in fact, FEMA is broke vis-a-vis the federal flood program. Subsidies are going to be disbanded, and taxpayers who have mortgages who are in the flood zone are going to find themselves with non-subsidized requirements to purchase flood insurance. That would have a significant impact, especially in Nassau County, and especially on the heels of Sandy. So I understand it's a federal issue per se, but what can you do in terms of alleviating or mitigating the impact that homeowners may face next year or in 2 years when those subsidies run out?
Yeah, well, the first way that you should, obviously on the federal legislation, it needs to change. And that's a story for another day with our federal representatives. But the fact of the matter is, you can protect yourself right now under the New York Rising program. If you were affected during Superstorm Sandy, you can elevate your home, and you can take yourself into an insurance premium that is affordable and realistic. Because if you do the mitigation, obviously, you don't have the threat, and you minimize your risk to the insurer, which in turn reduces your premium dramatically, is my understanding. So right now, the dollars are beginning to flow. In Nassau County, there's 72,000 homes affected. There is only about 3,720 homes that actually have completed the entire process to receive a reimbursement. The program is still open, and I would encourage anyone that has not applied to apply. Elevation is specifically covered, and mitigation, so either raising your utilities itself or elevating the entire structure, all of which will directly affect your premium. And that's a good way to protect yourself now. And we'll certainly use our office to advocate, for our citizens, for common sense legislation and affordable legislation. That program obviously should be continue to be flooded. That's the purpose of having a program such as that in place. Understanding, though, that the federal government does expect those that have the ability to protect their homes to do it now while this program is funded, and acute knowledge that you are in a flood zone as affected by Hurricane Sandy, would allow. So that's what I would encourage at this point.
Rabbi.
My name is Michael Morris. I'm from West Hempstead. I've got a couple of points to make. The first is in Franklin Square, there is a sign that says Mangano, thanks for not raising taxes. Thank you.
Correct. Thank you.
A couple of points. The first one is government. In Nassau County itself, there's too much government. There are too many water boards and library boards and school boards, and there's a clash between the town of Hempstead and the county, where you can ask for a traffic light and the town says it's the county, and the county says it's the town. What can you do to, like the Republican Party holds, to reduce and minimize that?
Well, first in Nassau County, you need to lead by example. I reduced the size of Nassau County government by 20%. That's 20% less paychecks that are written every week. It's 20% less health care and pension benefits that this generation, especially future generations, will have to pay. Right now, we are being crushed by past obligations here in the county. My pension contribution, or the county, or yours, if you're a taxpayer here, has risen over $100 million. The health care contribution over $40 million. And we found a way to meet that by reducing the size of government without asking, this generation to pay for those very, very expensive benefits. So number one, you have to lead by example. You have to cut fraud, waste, and abuse, which we work on every day. We've cut over $280 million in our spending, reduced the size of government by 20%. We continually look at programs and administrative duties to eliminate duplicative administrative jobs. and we've been very successful in that event. With respect to the multi-jurisdictional issues that we have here, obviously, in our county, we put forth a purchasing consortium so that all the subdivisions could utilize the buying power of the size of the county. We've been very successful in natural gas purchases, office supplies, paper, which government uses like significant amount of paper for copying and writing letters. So that's what we can encourage. The county has no direct jurisdiction to consolidate any other level of government. It either has to be done constitutionally, either on the state level, or certainly some of the jurisdictions are locally governed, meaning the municipalities themselves and the people that live in them can affect the change, whether they want to go in a different direction or join another school district. Those things really are not at the county level. And quite frankly, coming into government with an inherited $385 million deficit and a lagging economy and the loss of job growth, I've had a tremendous amount of time that I had to dedicate to the actual job at hand, rather than issues that may sound nice, but we can't effectuate change. I really do try to do this job, like many of you will try to do your jobs, with the tasks that you're expected to do in the jurisdiction that falls, and the responsibilities that fall within your job duties. And that's why I go to work every day and try to live up to and fulfill my job duties and save our taxpayers' money.
My second question, thank you, is that there are rumors, or it's true, politicians in New Jersey are trying to move this Orthodox unit to relocate to New Jersey.
Well, we can't have that. Well, we'd like to move you to Nassau County. Okay. I invite you to come and meet with me and my economic development team. I guarantee you, just as the other half a dozen or so companies move to Nassau County, we will find you a nice, comfortable, affordable, respectful place to continue the great work that you do.
Depending on employee performance, we'll be moving some people to Nassau County and some to Jersey. Any other questions? I saw you had a question.
Yeah. My name is Matt Gorlow. I'm a resident of Cedars. We met a couple weeks ago at a local event, and I asked this question, and I figured for the purpose of this crowd, we can ask the question again. Some of you addressed it already. Obviously, with the storm, there's larger mitigation projects that, like New York City came out with a 500-page report already, with a plan on what to do. Obviously, it wasn't funded yet, but what would you say in terms of working with New York City to try to work with some of these larger mitigation plans? And also in the short term, how to deal with the rising, insurance premiums. Maybe something I can work on. I watched New York rising. I was flooded. They indicated to me that the rising home wouldn't necessarily be paid 100%, and it wouldn't be paid for somebody who didn't have more than 50% damage, which is a good portion of the people. They wouldn't pay for that, plus because they already paid for fixing, repairing the below. So I don't know.
Well, to answer that question, I would say that there was a significant amount of misinformation for about a year. And a little bit less than a year. About last Tuesday or so, the federal government finally came out with the final rules and regulations for these programs, which are much more relaxed than originally promulgated or articulated, if you will. I've spoken and I speak regularly with New York State. With respect to the elevation program, you are covered, and there's actually additional money for it, and you could be 100% covered. You just need to demonstrate the costs and the need. So there's no general rule of 50% damage that I'm aware of at this point. So it's explained to me like as follows. As a general rule, there's $300,000 per damaged home set aside, less what FEMA has already provided you, less what your private insurer has provided you. And of course you would have to have at least $300,000 worth of damage. You have $250,000, that's less those two figures. In addition, there's an additional program in that if you could not afford or pay for the elevation, there's another $30,000 that's available. So homes should be able to achieve 100% or very close to that fee on elevation. I would encourage you to go through the process to do just that. The rules came out really much more relaxed than they were originally promulgated. And that goes for businesses as well. You know, quite frankly, we fought for all this money. I went to Washington for the supplemental appropriation. We put through a detailed recovery plan that was to the tune of $6.7 billion for Nassau County. And it's not just the county government, that's all the homeowners, the businesses, the environment. $6.7 billion, which was really not trimmed when finally adopted. We have a detailed hazard mitigation plan that's before the state, that we're working with the state on. Each and every project has a, as I said before, a county, state, and federal team, and in some cases the village or the town is engaged in that process, and we're working, you know, feverishly to get approval and funding for what we need to do is strengthen our entire county. But again, to your specific question, I would encourage anyone that was affected by Hurricane Sandy to utilize the New York Rising program. If you want to elevate, there are dollars in that program to elevate.
Any more questions? No. Sorry, Melanie?
So, I'm not sure if you mentioned anything to do with NYFA and how they're controlling Nassau County's finances.
Well, let me just say, NYFA was put in place long before I took office, and they will be in place by statute through 2025. Back when my predecessor took office, NYFA came in to bail out the county and provided a $100 million gift, basically, to the county. More money to the county that actually did not solve the problem. And at that point, NYFA formed. Shortly after I took office, NYFA decided that they were incorrectly applying the principles of accounting for the last decade that they've been here. And they came up with a much more stringent accounting called modified GAAP. We were on a modified accrual basis. So if you compare apples to apples and oranges, and as even reported by Newsday, Tom Suozzi would have had a control period long before I took office if we had the same accounting standards. It's just that simple. So what we did is once they moved to this very stringent accounting system, almost impossible, no, let me restate that, impossible to achieve overnight when you have a looming $385 million deficit. It would be equivalent to this. You run up your credit cards, you go to a financial advisor, and they say, simple, you can cure all the problems, just write a check for cash. It's not possible. So we agreed, and NYFA agreed, that we would take 4 years to move Nassau County to the modified GAAP. But each year we report on the modified accrual basis and the modified GAAP basis. On the modified accrual basis, I have surpluses just like my predecessor. On the modified GAAP, we have a deficit just like my predecessor would have had. And that deficit now has been reduced, though, by about 2/3 since I took office, because we're on a trail to end and move towards GAAP. I put together a 4-year plan. It was approved by the legislature and by NYFA to get to that point. Unfortunately, the legislature spent 2 years fighting over district lines and held up my policies. This is the first year of the 4-year plan that was approved, albeit in an election year because no one wanted criticism for obstructing, but it was been obstructed for 2 years prior to this year. So now that plan, the first year of that 4-year plan is taking effect. You know, election will come and go, we'll stay on that plan, and in 4 years Nassau County will move towards that GAAP basis, and it'll be stronger for it. But it is a much more conservative accounting method that counts almost everything as risk. And you'll see each year the risks that they cite, and to create that deficit, we've met those risks, meaning what I said came to reality. But that is the issue. Now, if I put a real property tax increase in, that would cure it more quickly because there's no risk, because there's no risk assigned to our taxpayers paying more property tax dollars because they believe, the fiscal people and financial people believe, no one will give up their home over real property tax, so that's the best revenue that they can get. We went in a different direction. Instead of having our taxpayers pay for the mistakes of the past and the bad policies, we've energized our economy and reduced expenses. So each year they have to see that happen, and they assign risk when I assign my budget. So now they say risk, and that risk equals deficit, and we're able to address it, because it's all come pretty much to fruition. So I reduced the size of government. They said that's a risk when I said I was going to do it. A year later, there's 20% less people and 20% less paychecks. There's no more risk. That's reoccurring savings each and every year. So that's how we're moving towards it. We did inherit a very sizable deficit here that could not be cured overnight unless you threw a lot more money at it, which I think would have had a negative effect, because it's not just about the money going to cure just that accounting statement. The fact of the matter is, if we threw that money, I believe our economy would have worsened. We certainly wouldn't have the lowest unemployment and the highest sales tax growth. We certainly wouldn't have more money to spend in Nassau County if we, again, added to the real property tax burden. We used to be the highest property tax county in the nation. We are no longer the highest property tax county. We're going in the right direction, I submit to you. And be honest with you, businesses look at this when it's time to make a decision as to where they're going to locate. In Nassau County now, they do not have to estimate that their real property taxes, at least on a county level, are going to go up every year. They understand that there's a government that cuts bureaucracy to keep employment in our county, and those are very strong messages. And I believe on that end, we all benefit a lot better than worrying about, whether there's a control period or not, whether we get to gap or not, in what period of time. It's not necessary to get the gap overnight. It would just be more harmful to you. And besides, I'm the only one that takes the heat. I can live with it. That's it. Doesn't affect your life. We keep moving ahead.
Thank the county executive for coming. We're gonna have Rebecca. I'm gonna see close in a minute. I just want to do two more things. I just want to recognize a couple more people that showed up late. Rebecca Knack for attending, and Lenny Bessler also in OU leadership. I also want to recognize Avi Spitzer from the Sephardic Community Federation. We appreciate your attendance as well. I also finally want to tell you that this packet of information here of everything you need to know about our New York work. Zahava Bierman Zahava Bierman works on our staff, as does Jake Adler in the 5 towns. If you're in the 5 towns area, you can speak to Jake if you want to get more involved. If for some reason you're here and you're not from the 5 towns, you can talk to Zahava. We thank them. We thank our communications staff, Ali Gal and Raz, and Jeff Lev, obviously, for all of his hard work as well. And with that, I will please recognize me.
I'm in the yeshiva business, and I think Jeff can tell you that one of the key components in success is accessibility and response. And from the day that you announced that you're running, I met my father. He should live and be well. Mr. Mangano has really always been so wonderfully responsive and accessible. I will not get back to someone. I will just tell you one just anecdotal story. And in the 5 towns, especially during Hurricane Sandy, obviously, it was impossible to put fingers in dikes and save the world. And as much as people were clamoring, but they really had no one to turn to. There were no organized governmental centers in our area. I think the closest one was somewhere in Island Park, and then there was another one in Our Lady of something or other church in Arbor. And we really pushed the FEMA representatives very, very hard to do something about it, and they said they have no place. And the Youngersville of Woodmere at the time, really, it was flooded, but they, vacuumed it out, cleaned it out. And I said, this isn't, a great place. We have generators, we have electricity. And they kept pushing it off. And then when people came and said, I speak to Ed Mangano, and gave him a call, and he said, we're going to take care of this. And he put on top of the situation, it was Craig Kraft at that time, Greg Grinnell from the state, Thomas Hill was there. And we made a community meeting, and we invited FEMA representatives, and we said, this is what we are going to do. We have the Office of Emergency Management there for Nassau County, for the state, and if you don't do this, we are going to do it ourselves. And they already announced that Nassau County is going to make their own disaster response center with 6 or 7 agencies in one central location on Peninsula and Unusual. The next day, you remember that, so FEMA came in and said, no, we're doing it. And it became the first Federal Emergency Management Agency center in an Orthodox or any synagogue for that matter in the United States history. And it was official with armed guards and government and running and I really think it was the move that you made, whether it was politics or not, but it was the moves that you made to do it, and it was an immediate response, and we really thank you for that. Obviously, on all efforts, and whether it's I'm in the school business, and whether it's though this is state level or federal level, but vouchers, but I know the feelings and commitment, at least the working together with the state leadership, with whether it's the Senate Majority Leader or it's the Senate Council. I find that Senator Skelos and Mr. Mangano are just working very closely to a lot of the ideals and moral issues that we believe in for our community, and for that he's been a tremendous friend, and I hope that he will be able to be he'll always be a friend, but at least a friend with power in the next 4 years as well. Thank you.
Thank you.